Yeah. Let's go. We just gotta go hard. I go the hardest. I bring the pain. Not what you used to. It's all part of the game. Yeah. I just gotta go hard. I just gotta go hard.
From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now on BGN Radio. Hello and welcome to another episode of the BGN Draft Show. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. I'm joined today by my co-host and fellow draft enthusiast, Dibes. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Be sure to check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Dibes, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. Week 0 was the appetizer. Week 1 is where the entree begins. A lot to break down tonight. So many great matchups. Let's go.
All right. I'm also joined by my co-host on Chalk Talk, Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _. Be sure to check out his Tough Cover radio show every Saturday. Mark, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing well. I am so fantasy drafted out right now. I just completed my 7th fantasy draft. In terms of I've done way more than that. But in terms of leagues of official record, my 7th league drafted tonight. And man, my brain is just numbers flying around my brain about fantasy. So I'm happy to talk some draft, a little change of pace.
All right. Well, we're going to get into it. And we're going to start off by recapping our Player of the Week predictions from last week. Mark picked Notre Dame quarterback Sam Hartman, who in his game went 19 of 23 passing for 251 yards and 4 touchdowns. I picked USC wide receiver Dorian Singer, who had 4 receptions for 41 yards and 1 touchdown. Came in the first quarter, and I thought he was going to have a big game, but he didn't. And Dibes picked USC running back Marshawn Lloyd, who had 9 carries for 42 yards, 1 reception for 12 yards. And so the order I set him there is the order we're going to award those. So Mark's going to get 2 points for his pick of Sam Hartman. I'll get a point for my pick of Dorian Singer, and Dibes gets a goose egg for Marshawn Lloyd.
Singer kind of got robbed by what his name is, Zachariah Bryan, right? Was that the name, the freshman? Yeah.
Branch.
Zachariah Branch, not Bryan. Zachariah Branch. Zach Bryan's a country singer. Zachariah Branch is apparently he was the number 4 recruit in the whole country, and he's a true freshman. Put up 2 touchdowns in that game and had some incredible plays. So people are really high on that guy.
And Taj Washington is like a stud, too. Taj Washington.
He's like the 2027 draft.
We'll be talking about him in a couple of years.
Yeah.
2026, the Eagles will have back-to-back Super Bowl championships. We'll be talking about him in this draft show. It'll be great. So
they're signing Isaiah Rodgers, so they have the future in mind, huh?
Hey, and kudos to Mark because Sam Hartman made me look like an idiot not having him in my top 10 quarterbacks for 2023, man. Efficient, highest QBR of any week 0 quarterback last week, man. He was efficient. He was in command. He was confident, poised. Wow, what a performance.
It's Navy. So I'm not gonna go too crazy. We did play against Navy. But I'll tell you what, that's exactly what you'd want to see them do against Navy. They looked as good as you'd hope they could look, and they dominated the game. And honestly, obviously, all the hype's going to be about Sam Hartman. Aldrich Estime stole that game for me. I mean, the running game for Notre Dame is going to be really good this year. The O-line's obviously really, really good. So getting me excited for the real games.
All right. Well, we're going to put last week in the review mirror. We're going to talk week 1. Technically, I guess last week was week 1. I thought they called it week 0, but maybe not. But
they do.
Anyway,
they do.
Okay, they still do. ESPN lists it all as week 1, so that was messing with me. But we're gonna start off our first main weekly segment. We're gonna give you guys some Eagles prospect profiles, some guys that you can watch when you're tuning into games on Saturday. So let's talk Eagles targets of the week. right, Dives, you start us off here. Give us your Eagles target of the week. Who are you keeping an eye on this weekend?
Absolutely, Trey Benson. We're going to be talking a lot about this one, the premier game of the week. Let's get into it. The loss of Mason Smith, defensive tackle for LSU, is everything here. And Trey Benson is a bruiser running back. He's really fun to watch. I think he's got RB1 potential in this draft. He's a guy that I think fits the mold of what the Eagles want to do. Didn't have that many carries last year, but he did have an efficient 2022 season, 6'1", 223 pounds. He's a guy that can make defenders miss. More like kind of between the tackles kind of dude, but he's definitely a playmaker. And, this guy playing alongside of Jordan Travis and elite playmakers and Johnny Wilson and I'm drawing a blank on the other, Keon Coleman, another wide receiver that with crazy upside. Jaheim Bell, tight end. I don't think this guy gets enough love. Trey Benson is for real, and I'm going to make this guy my top Eagles target.
All right, so Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State. We're going to be talking about his game a little bit more here in a moment. So, Mark, who is your top Eagles target to keep an eye on this weekend?
My top Eagles target is Kalen King, and that's close to home for a lot of the Eagles fans out there, which is kind of why I picked it. And you could make an argument. We've talked about this with guys like Kalen King, guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry. Are they realistic Eagles targets? My answer to that would be we don't know. We don't know if these guys will end up being, top 10 picks or if they'll end up being day 2 picks. There's so much variance when it's outside of the top couple names. So Kalen King comes from Penn State. He's a DB. They've never had a DB drafted in the first round. So I don't think it's an unrealistic target to bring up. Kalen King's got a lot to like. And, Penn State just has so many pro-ready guys, so many guys who are going to go in the top 50 next year. And it's why I, along with so many other college football guys, are buying into Penn State as a legitimate contender this season. And guys like Kalen King are the reason. He's a 5'11", 191-pound junior. In 2021, he had 21 tackles, a forced fumble, and 5 passes defensed. The tape was better than the numbers, though, and people were high on him right away. And he followed that up with one of the best seasons in the country last year in 2022 and at DB. 30 tackles, 3 picks, a forced fumble, 15 passes defensed. I thought he was elite last season, and I expect more of the same this year, even without Joey Porter Jr. Across from him. So that'll be the big thing to watch for, though. Does he lose a little bit of that because he doesn't have an elite CB1 across from him? He is the elite CB1 now. So that's kind of a step up that guys in college have to take when guys leave.
He's also got an amazing pass rush this year with like Chop Robinson and Abdul Carter. Man, that's elite.
Yeah, Penn State may not have ever had a defensive back taken in the first round, but they should have last year. Joey Porter Jr. had no business making it out of the first round.
Maybe they should have 2 years ago with Brisker as well.
Yeah.
That he was great last year, but 2 guys in a row that I think we all had ranked as first rounders, and especially Porter. We had him as like top 10 to 15 guy.
Yeah, Porter. I know Porter was 10 on my board, and I think I looked Brisker up earlier. He was like 26th on my board that year. So
I was probably
okay. My Eagles target to keep an eye on this weekend is linebacker Cedric Gray from North Carolina. He was a 4-star recruit in high school who also played wide receiver, so he's got a lot of athleticism. At least he did in high school. He's 6'2", 230 pounds. Last season was a tackle machine for North Carolina. He had 145 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, a sack, 2 interceptions, 6 passes defensed. He forced 3 fumbles. He recovered 2 fumbles. You watch this guy play, and I think he plays a lot bigger than his size. He's really instinctual in the running game. He knows how to use his leverage and momentum to his advantage when he's taking on bigger blockers. He had 12 tackles for loss. He's a good run defender, especially for a guy his size. Now, he is a little undersized, though, at 230 pounds, and he's not an elite athlete. My fear would be like transitioning to the NFL level. He's going to need to put on weight, and that might make him a little more sluggish. He also wasn't given a ton of demanding coverage responsibilities. They didn't put him in the slot. They didn't have him on tight ends or carrying guys up the seam. It was mostly just running backs and underneath zones. And so I would like to see some growth from him in coverage this year, at least in what he's asked to do. I think he's probably like a late day 2 guy right now. That would be my projection. Of course, like Mark said, a lot changes. Senior year of film is the most important film, and so we don't know the most important things about these guys. But I think he's a guy that right now I would say he would go in a range where the Eagles would contemplate maybe drafting a linebacker. So keep an eye on Cedric Gray out of North Carolina.
Made my most underrated prospect list.
All right. So check those out. Check out Dibes' stuff for sure. I get a lot of my information from Dibes as well, my background stuff. So hat tip to Dibes there. So that is our Eagles prospects of the week. Now let's turn the page. We're going to talk our player of the week predictions.
You can't manage this, can't break this bar funded. Gotta keep my distance when you not 100. Those the same ones say they love you, late and funny. You can't match my energy, and yeah, you know it. Way too cold, yeah, man, I'm way too cold. Way too cold, yeah, man, I'm way too cold.
All right, player of the week predictions. Mark, you won last week, so we'll give you the first shot at your selection for this week. Who is going to be this week's player of the week for you?
I'm going to go with a guy in a big game, probably the biggest game on Saturday, South Carolina versus North Carolina. And I think someone else might have the more notable quarterback in this game and the probably the second best quarterback in the country as their player of the week. I'm going to save him for another week. Save him for hopefully a week where they play a worse ACC defense. And I'm going to take the quarterback playing against that ACC defense. I'm going to take Spencer Rattler, the quarterback from South Carolina. And he was a guy who obviously for years has been a name that we've known because he was a former 5-star recruit. He was on the Netflix quarterback recruiting show. Before, I forget what show the name of that show is before he went to college. So people know him from that as well. And last year, transferring to South Carolina, he had a lot of buzz after getting replaced by Caleb Williams at Oklahoma. And obviously, no shame there. We see how good Caleb Williams is now, and being replaced by him, no shame there. But he was disappointing for the first 10 games. He had 1,980 yards, about 190-something yards per game, about 198 yards per game. Last 3 weeks, though, things changed. And those things changed against Tennessee, Clemson, and Notre Dame, 3 of the best teams that they had on their entire schedule. In those 3 games, he passed for 1,050 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. I think he figured something out down the stretch. I think their coach, Beamer, figured something out with Rattler down the stretch. And I think we see South Carolina come out and punch UNC's defense in the face early on. I think Rattler's going to be throwing it all over the yard. It's going to be a high-scoring game with Rattler and May duking it out. But I like South Carolina to just outscore them because I think the worst unit out of the 4 of South Carolina and North Carolina's offense and defense is North Carolina's defense. So I think Rattler continues what he finished last year.
All right, so you alluded to it. I'll go ahead and give my player of the week prediction. I took the quarterback on the other side of the matchup in Drake May. Drake May is I don't know if we can say 1B to Caleb Williams 1A. I guess he's more just QB2 this year.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it shakes out as the year goes along. He had a 92.5 PFF grade last season in the pocket, which led all quarterbacks in the country. He also added 899 rushing yards, which ranked 3rd in QB rushing. He had a 97.5 PFF grade on deep throws, and he had 45 big-time throws, which led all quarterbacks. And so this is a guy that can dissect you from the pocket. He can break the pocket and scramble. He can push the ball downfield. And oh, by the way, South Carolina gave up an average of 38 points per game in their last 4 games of the year. Mm-hmm. Also, they scored 35 points a game. So like Mark said, this should be a shootout. But South Carolina also lost Cam Smith and Darius Rush, 2 of their top 3 cornerbacks in the draft. So I think this is going to be a game that lights up the scoreboard. And so I picked Drake May as my player of the week for this.
Yeah, keep an eye out on how Drake May responds to the blitz. That's what really troubled him at the end of this last season. So that's a big one for me. I'm going to go the only non-QB this week, which I'm a little surprised about. I'm going to go Malik Neighbors, a guy that is my wide receiver 3 in this draft behind Agbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. You look at the strengths of that Florida State defense. They are loaded. Their front 7 is absolutely loaded, depth-wise on the defensive line. Jared Verse, Fabian Lovett. But in the defensive backfield, it's a little bit unproven. They've got a lot of talent coming up. Fentrell Cypress II is a cornerback that is definitely kind of a rising star. Azariah Thomas, another breakout star, 6'2" cornerback, sophomore that I think we'll be probably talking about in 12 months from now. But Malik Neighbors is elite as it gets, a guy that has versatility, can dominate in the slot, dominate outside. Really intriguing guy that I think is also on my Eagles target radar that would fit really well, possibly in the back end of round 1. Malik Neighbors is real.
All right, so those are our player predictions of the week. So some more guys that you guys can keep an eye on as you watch games this weekend. Let's pivot now to our game of the week. And for the game of the week, we are going to number 5 LSU at number 8 Florida State. This is a Sunday night football game, Sunday at 7:30. This is a rematch of a week 1 game last year, a week 1 game that was 1 year, the 4th. So it's 1 day early from being the 1-year anniversary, but it was a incredible game. Florida State won the game last year 24-23. LSU scored with just over 4 minutes left in that game to make it 24-17. They forced a punt, and then Malik Neighbors, Dibe's player of the week projection, fumbled the punt, and Florida State recovered it. Florida State proceeded to fumble the ball on the 1-yard line, and LSU went on an 11-play, 99-yard scoring drive in 1 minute and 20 seconds. They scored a touchdown to tie the game as the game expired, but the game-tying extra point was blocked, and Florida State survived. And so it was an epic game in week 1 of last year. It's going to be an epic game again this year. Dibes, what are we watching in this game?
Holy cow. Star talent across the board for Florida State, led by Jordan Travis. Undersized quarterback, doesn't have the great, elite arm strength, but kind of like Michael Penix Jr., like just a phenomenal dual threat quarterback that has some of the best, weapons offensively in all of college football. Keon Coleman is a guy that the best wide receiver you haven't heard of. Johnny Wilson, 6'6" wide receiver, just elite contested catch dude, great athlete. Jaheim Bell, a transfer coming into Florida State, kind of a gadget guy, kind of can be a halfback, tight end. Really intriguing guy as well. So Florida State is just completely loaded. This is the season for Florida State to truly make noise in a college football playoff, and it starts here with a great matchup against LSU, who is missing arguably their best player. Mekhi Wingo is a guy to watch in this one. Without Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo is their second best defensive tackle prospect. He's going to be drafted, probably a day 2 guy. And if he can't hold up, if he gets eaten up by that Florida State offensive line, watch out, because Florida State's offense is elite as it gets.
All right, Mark, what do you have to add on to that?
Florida, I don't do this very often, but I'm dropping a game of the year. I've already made my bet early in this game to avoid line movement. I love Florida State +3 in this game against LSU. I think Florida State is a legitimate playoff contender. In fact, I have them as the number 3 team in the country in my playoff, whereas I think LSU is a phony playoff contender. Progress isn't always linear. Brian Kelly went to LSU and went 9-3 right away. People are expecting him to progress on that and to take the next step into being a playoff contender. Brian Kelly goes 9-3 with the best of them. That's what he does. I can tell you that as a Notre Dame fan. And he will have years where he goes to the playoff. He hasn't installed his system there in LSU. Where Florida State is talent-wise, where like how Dives laid out there, that's because Mike Norvell's been there a while now. This is his year 4, I believe, for Mike Norvell. This is year 2 for Brian Kelly. LSU is going to be where Florida State is now in a year or 2, in my opinion, where they're fully ready to compete for a title. I don't think they're there right now, and I think there's a way bigger quarterback discrepancy than most would say. I think Jordan Travis is far better than Jaden Daniels. I don't think a lot of people would agree with that. I think people would say it's even. Jaden Daniels is much more dependent on his rushing. I think Jordan Travis can beat you with his arm a lot more than Daniels can.
And not to mention LSU's defensive front, they're going to be missing defensive tackle Mason Smith, who is widely expected to be a top half of the first-round selection. He's serving a 1-game suspension for receiving improper benefits from an autograph signing in 2021 pre-nil, which is a total joke. But he's going to be out this game. Also, a guy I'm excited to watch is Jared Verse. I had him as edge 2 last year, and then he surprisingly returned to school. I think he would have been a top 10, top 12 pick. I had him above Tyree Wilson. I had him above all these guys, and he went back to school. And now this year, he's probably going to be a top 5 pick if he builds on what he did last year. So that's a big discrepancy in the front, that Jared Verse is there for Florida State and Mason Smith is missing for LSU.
Jared Verse got paid to stay there because the boosters think they have a chance to win a championship.
Jared Verse would have been a first-round pick in this year's draft. That's how good he is.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think he would have been top 10. I think he would have gone top 10.
We cannot have an LSU versus Florida State discussion without mentioning Harold Perkins.
Yeah.
If no Mason Smith means Harold Perkins' time to shine is this weekend, showing that he's a potential top 5 pick in 2 years from now. That's how good this guy is. Harold Perkins, as a rusher, has Parson-esque ability and is completely dominant. So Harold Perkins, if there's any reason LSU has a chance in this one, is because he's just in Jordan Travis's face all game long and forces a turnover here or there. That is the difference.
All right. So Mark has picked Florida State in this game. Dives, do you have a pick?
Florida State. I got it. All right, Florida State.
All right. So both of the guys like Florida State here. LSU is currently favored by 2.5 in this game. So Mark, you got your bet in at a good time. The line has moved a 0.5 point. So, all right. That's going to about do it for this quick preview here. Do either of you guys have any other games you want to shout out briefly that the people should be looking into? Any takes you need to fire off about college football? We'll give you a chance to do that here. Dibes, do you got anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, I love the Clemson-Duke matchup. That's definitely one I'm really excited about. Riley Leonard is a very good quarterback that we don't talk about enough. I had him rated above Sam Hartman, so if he we'll see what happens with Riley Leonard. But Clemson's defense is absolutely outrageous. They are completely loaded. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Barrett Carter, the list goes up. Ruka Roro, the list goes on and on. Andrew Makuba, Nate Wiggins at safety. Those are all guys that will be drafted day 1 to day 2. And how Riley Leonard handles that is going to be really fun to watch. I think Duke is one of the unspoken teams in 2023. They're going to be really good.
All right, Mark, any games you want to shout out or any takes you need to fire off?
UTSA could be a fun team to watch this year if you're looking outside the Power 5 conferences. Frank Harris is playing his 35th year in college. No, I think it's year 7, but the guy's just been in college forever. He's going to break so many records because of how many games he's got the chance to play. He's playing Houston week 1. Houston is favored by 1 point. UTSA, I think, is a far better team. I think it's going to be a fun, high-scoring game between 2 Texas teams. But I know Houston's the big, bad, Big 12 team. I think UTSA has got a far better roster.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of the BGN Draft Show. Thank you guys for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, be sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all the shows in the BGN feed. You can check us out on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. We will catch you guys next week for another episode of the BGN Draft Show.
Yeah. Let's go. We just gotta go hard.